The Prime Minister lays out her plans to combat what she calls the hidden injustice of mental illness. It's part of a broader strategy to create what Theresa May described as a shared society to try to prevent extremists exploiting divisions and discontent.
A failure to take this opportunity to show the ability of mainstream centre-ground politics to respond to public concern would further entrench the very divisions we seek to overcome.
Also on the programme this lunchtime, chaos in London for millions of commuters as a 24-hour tube strike brings most of the underground to a halt. 17 people arrested in France after reality TV star Kim Kardashian was robbed of millions of pounds of jewellery last year. Donald Trump calls Meryl Streep one of Hollywood's most overrated actresses after she criticises him in a speech at the Golden Globe Awards. And heavy snow in southern Italy. Dozens of people die as a cold snap grips large parts of Europe.
In the south, frustration from passengers as both sides in the southern rail dispute debate the issues and effect of ongoing strike action. And a new strain of bird flu. 9 cases confirmed in Dorset, but dozens more swans are dead.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Theresa May has described mental illness as a hidden injustice which has been dangerously disregarded and said she is determined to transform attitudes. The Prime Minister has been outlining a package of measures, including plans to give extra training for teachers and employers as part of broader proposals to create what she described as a shared society. Mental health experts, though, say more funding is needed to improve services. Here's our health correspondent, Elaine Dunkley.
There are no words for what it does to a family. Shock is not the word, it's just your whole reality is blown to pieces.
In 2014, Dr. Sangeeta Mahajan's son Saga took his own life. He was just 20 years old. He had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. 10 weeks later, he was dead.
They don't discharge patients with adequate information. The doors were closed for us. We were told you either go to A&E or your GP, and that's the only way you can come back to us. We had no direct access back to the specialist services. That is wrong.
The Prime Minister, Theresa May, has described mental health care as a burning injustice. Today, a promise of a major overhaul.
Left unaddressed, it destroys lives, separates people from each other, and deepens the divisions within our society. Changing this goes right to the heart of our humanity, to the heart of the kind of country we are, the attitudes we hold, and the values we share.
The plans include mental health first aid training for secondary schools. Employers and organisations will also be given additional guidance in supporting staff who need to take time off. And there will be greater emphasis on community care. The Prime Minister says this is a historical opportunity to right a wrong. But for those on the front line of mental health services, funding is a major concern.
Mental health is still very underfunded compared to other areas of medicine. It generates probably 20 to 25% of the disease burden, total disease burden of all diseases. And yet the funding is 10 to 12% in this country.
So little people are talking about it.
4 years ago, Jake Mills tried to end his life. He now runs a mental health charity to help others. He says in order for there to be change, there needs to be greater awareness and understanding.
Education needs to happen, and without being kind of facetious about it, if there was a disease that existed that was killing more men in this country under the age of 49, and it was preventable and it was treatable, we would all be experts on it. We would know exactly what to look out for. We'd know exactly what to do if we had symptoms.
Where's Daddy's teeth?
Jake says he is living proof that with the right intervention, there is hope. But many feel in order for mental health to get the same recognition as physical health, additional funding is crucial. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.
Let's speak to our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan. And the Prime Minister has outlined a strategy. How much difference will it make, though?
Well, that is going to be the key question here, and certainly an awful lot of mental health professionals will hope that it makes a difference, because the need for it to make a difference, as you heard in that report, is urgent and intense. One of the ironies in recent years is that there has been this campaign called Time to Change, aimed at reducing the stigma around mental health, which Theresa May was talking about this morning, and that has been partially successful, and that has led to people coming forward talking about mental health services and seeking support. But when they have done that, the support simply has often not been there. There was a report out in November from a think tank, the Educational Policy Institute, that found that, for instance, with young people, 1 in 4 was being turned away from therapy. 2/3 of people aged between 16 and 34 who had actually attempted suicide had not received any follow-up care at all. And that was all taking place, bear in mind, after the government had promised to spend nearly £2 billion on mental health services in England. The reason the money is not getting through from the Treasury is that NHS England and local health commissioners have not ring-fenced into that. Because of the wider pressures on finances within the NHS, that has meant that a lot of that money that was meant to go to mental health has simply gone into acute care, into physical health care needs. Up to now, it has been possible for healthcare officials to ignore central diktats, if you like, from politicians in Westminster. The key will be whether Theresa May's rhetoric today can turn into the reality on the front line for mental health patients and for clinicians.
Michael Buchanan, thank you. Well, our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, is in Westminster. It was a pretty long speech this morning. How much more did we learn about Mrs May's vision for her government?
Well, I think what we got, Sophie, was Mrs May's attempt at a big idea beyond Brexit, what she wants her government to be about beyond pulling out of the European Union. And she said it's wholesale social reform. And at its heart is this idea of trying to tackle what she regards as everyday forgotten injustices around issues like discrimination in the criminal justice system, around life expectancy for poorer families, and yes, also around mental health provision. The second aspect of it is about recalibrating where government focuses its effort. Mrs May's view is, for too long, successive governments have simply focused on those who are most disadvantaged and most deprived. It has ignored people who are just about managing but are still having a pretty hard time. And she's promised a raft of announcements over the coming months, filling in some of the details, because frankly today, beyond mental health, we got no real specific commitments. The difficulty she faces, I think, is this. Brexit is such a massive undertaking for any government that trying to do almost anything substantial beyond that is going to be incredibly difficult. And that, coupled with a lack of resources, means trying to undertake the hugely ambitious sort of reforms in the area of mental health and social care that Mrs May wants to undertake is going to be extraordinarily difficult. The danger that she ends up over-promising and under-delivering.
Norman Smith, thank you. The value of the pound fell by almost 1% this morning in early trading against the dollar and the euro. The fall came after the Prime Minister gave an interview yesterday in which she spoke about the UK's future outside the European Union. Let's speak to our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, and it just goes to show how sensitive it all is.
It does, Sophie. Markets are obviously still concerned about what is the route of exit. Yes, Britain is leaving the European Union, but what kind of trading relationship will we have with the rest of Europe, our most important trading partner? Yes, it had a weak morning today, but it's been weak really since the referendum. It fell by 11% on the referendum night. Now, why does that matter? Because we import a lot of our food and a lot of our fuel into the UK. So if sterling is weak, if the pound is weak, that means that prices will go up, which affects consumers. There are some upsides to having a weaker pound. Our exports obviously become more competitive. And interestingly, the stock market has had a very strong day, a strong morning, because although a lot of the companies are UK based, they actually earn in dollars. And so dollars become more valuable. That's important, of course, for people's pension funds. Lots of our pension funds are invested in the stock market. So if the stock market is strong, that's good for pensions. But the overall judgment of the markets at the moment is that because of uncertainty around the direction of travel of Brexit and how hard that Brexit will be. They believe the UK economy will suffer because of that uncertainty, and therefore they are saying that the pound, or they are signalling, and the pound will be weaker because of that.
Kamal, thank you. The taxpayer is no longer the largest shareholder in Lloyds Banking Group after the government reduced its stake. The government spent £20 billion on a 43% stake in Lloyds at the height of the financial crisis. It now owns less than 6% of shares. The government has already said it wants to return the bank to full private ownership during the course of 2017. Millions of commuters have had a chaotic start to the week after a strike on the London Underground shut down most of the network. One of the capital's busiest train stations, Clapham Junction, had to be evacuated because of overcrowding after large numbers of people tried to find an alternative way into work. The strike, which is due to end tonight, is over staff numbers and safety on the tube. Our correspondent Daniel Bircher is in central London for us now. Daniel.
Yes, this strike started yesterday evening, but it was only this morning during the rush hour that the full impact became clear. There has been some improvement today, a few more stations open, though the one behind me remains locked, and it has been a difficult start to the week for many tube passengers. This is what commuters on London's Underground faced this morning. A third of all stations closed and a limited service on most of the lines that were operating. Around 4 million people use the network. The strike has left travellers frustrated, with journeys taking far longer than usual, as passengers had to find other ways of getting to work.
I gave myself 2 hours, and it looks like I'm going to be late because I start work at 9 and it's 8:35.
I've almost missed quite a few exams because of all this industrial action going on, and it's quite irritating.
I just think it's unfair because it puts all of us into a situation where we're all late for work.
The way I see it is, it kind of is what it is, really. You know what I mean? They've got their cause, so yeah, you work around it.
Because there are so few tube trains running, commuter traffic on the roads has been even heavier than usual. And despite an extra 150 buses being laid on, the bus network has been packed with long queues building up. The strike, involving members of 2 unions, the RMT and the TSSA, is about jobs and staffing levels. The unions say cuts are jeopardising safety.
They need to put back in a task force response almost to putting this safe. And of course we have sympathy with the travelling public and we regret this strike. It had been avoidable, we'd been in weeks of talks, but we were up against a brick wall.
London's Mayor Sadiq Khan said he condemned the industrial action and that talks to resolve the issues should be resumed.
I know that this strike could have been avoided. I know this strike is unnecessary, and I'm imploring the trade unions to come back and talk to the management team about resolving this so there aren't further days of industrial action.
London Underground says there is no need for a strike.
We will continue our process of recruiting additional people. We also want to work with the trade unions over the next couple of months to identify where we may need to strengthen that. So this dispute can only be resolved by the trade unions working with us, collaboratively talking around the table, not through strike action.
Some commuters face further disruption this week in an unrelated strike on Southern rail services. Passengers are being told to travel only if essential on Tuesday, Wednesday and Friday, when train drivers belonging to ASLEF are expected to be on strike in a long-running dispute over the role of guards. The company says there'll be no Southern services on strike days, with only a limited number of bus links instead. Today's industrial action on the London Underground has not involved overground rail services, but there has been no interchange to the tube network at key stations. And in places, the numbers of passengers trying to use rail services instead has caused problems. Clapham Junction was temporarily evacuated due to overcrowding. There were no trains stopping and passengers had to wait outside the station before it reopened. Now, the tube strike is due to end at 6 o'clock this evening, but London Underground says it's been focusing its efforts on trying to provide the best service possible under the circumstances during the day. So there will be further problems this evening, even after the strike has ended, and things will only get back to normal tomorrow.
Daniel, thank you. 17 people have been arrested in connection with the robbery of the reality TV star Kim Kardashian in October last year. A gang of masked men burst into her apartment in Paris and held her at gunpoint before making off with millions of pounds worth of jewellery and cash. Well, let's speak to our correspondent in Paris, Hugh Schofield. What more can you tell us, Hugh?
There was a series of dawn raids this morning in the Paris area, in Normandy, in Rouen, and then down south as well, in Grasse and in Nice. And as you say, 17 people were picked up, all ages from 20 right up to 70. And police are saying some of them are well known to them as hardened members of the criminal underworld. What led to this, it's quite clear now, was a clue left at the scene at this luxury hotel back in October by the perpetrators. If you remember, there were 5 masked men who burst in, held her at gunpoint, took away this big booty in jewels. But they also left behind DNA. One of them had handled the ligatures which she was bound with, and another had dropped a pendant on the road outside. And from these 2 bits of DNA, they were able to make a match with somebody who was on their books already. The police then put this individual under surveillance. They've had this information for a long time, clearly, were watching this man and his gang, and were able to see the preparations as the gang prepared to dispose of the jewels through fences and jewellers and so on. And it was at the end of a long period of surveillance then that they decided to swoop this morning and arrest 17. One question still remaining to be answered, I think, is whether this was an inside job, because, of course, one of the key facts in all of this was that on that very night, the bodyguard of Kim Kardashian was absent. Did the gang know that fact?
Hugh, thank you. The time is just after 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. The Prime Minister has been laying out her plans to combat what she calls the hidden injustice of mental illness. And still to come, a British trucker is thanked for raising money for the family of the Polish lorry driver killed in the Berlin Christmas market attack.
In South today, the new strain of bird flu is in Dorset with 9 confirmed cases at one of the South's major visitor attractions. Dozens more swans have died. Plus, warnings of disruption ahead as the long-promised scheme to spruce up Wokingham finally gets underway.
The Hollywood musical La La Land looks like the film to beat at this year's Oscars after it swept the board at the Golden Globes, winning a record 7 awards. It was also a good night for the Brits, but the evening was also filled with political drama as Meryl Streep took to the stage and criticised the president-elect Donald Trump for mocking a disabled reporter. This morning, Mr. Trump hit back, calling her one of the most overrated actresses in Hollywood. James Cook reports now from Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, California, where stories are spun and stars are born. The place of glitz and glamour, of gowns and gossip. The place they call
La La Land!
Yeah! La La Land!
There were a record 7 Golden Globes for the musical, including acting awards for its stars Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone.
This is a film for dreamers, and I think that hope and creativity are 2 of the most important things in the world, and that's what this movie is about.
The television categories included wins for Atlanta, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, and for Claire Foy, who played Britain's Queen Elizabeth in The Crown.
I really wouldn't be here if it wasn't for some extraordinary women. I'm going to thank them. One of them is Queen Elizabeth II. She has been at the centre of the world for the past 63 years, and I think the world could do with a few more women at the centre of it, if you ask me.
There were 3 acting awards for BBC co-production The Night Manager. Its star, Tom Hiddleston, used his speech to highlight conflict in Africa.
There's a terrible situation happening for children. The Night Manager is about arms dealing, and there are far too many arms going into South Sudan.
Co-star Hugh Laurie's remarks were also political, with a dig at Donald Trump.
I suppose made more amazing by the fact that I'll be able to say I won this at the last ever Golden Globes. I don't mean to be gloomy, it's just that it has the words Hollywood, foreign and press in the title. I just don't know what...
Receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, Meryl Streep also lambasted the president-elect.
Disrespect invites disrespect. Violence incites violence. When the powerful use their position to bully others, we all lose. So Hollywood is crawling with outsiders and foreigners. And if we kick them all out, you'll have nothing to watch but football and mixed martial arts, which are not the arts.
Elsewhere, Britain's Aaron Taylor-Johnson won for his supporting role in the dark crime thriller Nocturnal Animals.
Wow, what a tremendous honour. Thank you, HFPA.
for acknowledging me in this role. Thank you. Tom Ford, thank you so much for this opportunity. Creating this role and collaborating on this journey was an immense joy.
Well, Hollywood can be fun and frivolous, but it also prides itself on tackling serious subjects. And many stars here on the red carpet are predicting a surge in political films this year, following the most divisive of elections. James Cook, BBC News, at the Golden Globes in Los Angeles.
And this was Donald Trump's response to Meryl Streep this morning. He tweeted that Meryl Streep is one of the most overrated actresses in Hollywood who doesn't know him but attacked him last night at the Golden Globes. He went on to call her a Hillary flunky who lost big. The Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has held the first meeting between British government ministers and Donald Trump's top aides. Mr. Johnson will be meeting leading Republicans in Washington later today. Our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins is with me now. And this is all paving the way for Theresa May's first visit to meet Donald Trump. It could be as soon as next month.
That's right. There's both substance and a lot of symbolism to this visit by the Foreign Secretary, attempting to get the US-UK relationship back, if you like, on an even keel, because the transatlantic ship was listing quite badly, frankly, after Nigel Farage was so quick to Trump Tower after the election of the president-elect, Donald Trump. And that really sent an entirely negative signal, particularly from Downing Street's point of view, about where the axis of the US-UK relationship really lay. So Boris Johnson is in New York and Washington as a bit of a trailblazer. In New York, he saw members of the incoming Trump administration, the First Minister to do so, and that was very important. And apparently, they had very frank discussions, including about big differences between London and Washington, the new incoming administration in Washington, over Russia in particular. Today, the Foreign Secretary will be seeing Republican leaders on the Hill in Congress, and that's also very important. But I think it's worth underlining that he can't, for protocol reasons, see the likely next Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, because he's facing congressional confirmation hearings, and it wouldn't be proper for the Foreign Secretary to see him before he's confirmed in office. So it's an important preparatory step, but he certainly won't be seeing Donald Trump. That's a moment reserved for Theresa May.
James, thank you. More than a quarter of young people in Britain say they don't feel in control of their lives as a result of political events in the UK, such as Brexit. According to a national study, money worries are top of the list of issues, making them feel anxious about their future. Anissa Kadri reports.
For 19-year-old Millie Rawley, getting help was crucial to getting her life back on track after her mum died.
I faced a series of relationship breakdowns and different forms of abuse until eventually, when I was 16, I became homeless for 3 months. And this was when my mental health really declined.
After receiving treatment in hospital, Millie is living at the YMCA while doing her A-levels, and she's now feeling much happier.
Compared to years ago, I know where I want to go, I know what I want to do, and I know how to get there.
According to the Prince's Trust, which has supported Millie, more than a quarter of young people don't feel in control of their lives. The charity says well-being for 16 to 25-year-olds is at its lowest level in 8 years of research.
We need to invest in things like cadet programmes in schools that are character building and encourage teamwork. I think we need to invest much more heavily in vocational training in the further education sector.
Concerns over body image, recent political events including the Brexit vote and the Syria situation, as well as money worries were all issues raised by the survey. Issues these young people say are a concern.
Because of recent political events and the economic outlook, there's just a really high level of uncertainty.
You have to have a certain income to rent a place.
A lot of employers expect you to have lots of experience, just even to find like an entry-level job.
Whilst life can be difficult for all young people, Millie says it's important to reach out when you know things are really spiralling out of control. Anissa Kadri, BBC News.
North Korea says it's ready at any time to test a long-range missile. The country's leader, Kim Jong-un, said in his New Year's address that the missile was in the final stages of development. Washington has made it clear that if it launched an intercontinental ballistic missile, America would shoot it down. So is the threat real or just posturing before Donald Trump becomes president? Here's our correspondent in Seoul, Stephen Evans.
They look fearsome, the big missiles paraded through Pyongyang, though some experts think they can't actually do what North Korea claims they can. They're more for show. Now, though, the tone has changed. In his New Year's message, Kim Jong-un said his country was in the final stages of developing an intercontinental ballistic missile, a long-range missile able to hit US cities. A message echoed on the North Korea news. The talking is getting tougher. And the tweeting. Donald Trump tweeted about North Korea getting ICBMs. It won't happen. But Washington's outgoing Secretary of Defense said that if North Korea did test an ICBM, it might be shot down.
Their nuclear weapons and ballistic missile defense programs are a serious threat to us. We try to stay ahead of that, and we are staying ahead of that with our missile defenses to make sure we've upgraded their number, their type, so that we're sure we can defend ourselves. We've deployed missile defenses in South Korea, Japan, Guam.
In Pyongyang, it was Sports Day on Sunday. Workers from different industries competed and chanted that they wanted the two halves of Korea to reunite. Kim Jong-un visited a silk and textile mill. He'll have more on his mind, though, than the design of quilts. His nuclear ambitions are moving up the Washington agenda as Donald Trump prepares for power. Neither is known as a quiet man. Stephen Evans, BBC News, South Korea.
When the attack against the Berlin Christmas market happened, one of the first people to be killed was a Polish driver whose lorry was used by the attacker. A British lorry driver was so moved by what happened that he launched an appeal to help the Polish man's family. So far, it has raised nearly £200,000. Today, he is being thanked by the Polish ambassador in London. And Kasia Madeira is at the Polish embassy for us now. Kasia.
Dave Duncan had never met Łukasz Urban. He'd never known him. He had no contact with him. But when he heard about what happened to the Polish trucker in Berlin, he felt so moved, so compassionate that he set up this online crowdfunding campaign. And today is about thanking him on behalf of the Polish community in the UK and also the Polish community in Poland. Dave, when you first heard about Łukasz and what happened, what did you feel?
Obviously, I was very moved by the story, like everybody else. Mainly, it touched me a bit more being a truck driver myself, thinking of his poor family that he'd left behind and his work colleagues, and he worked for his cousin, so obviously it was a family firm, and it just touched me in that way, yeah.
And where did the idea come to set up this online fund?
I'd seen things on the news and programmes about this GoFunding and things like that, and I thought I'll have a look into it, looked into it. Found GoFundMe, read through it, and yeah, it seemed like a good idea.
The results have been phenomenal. You've had a lot of support.
Absolutely fantastic, yeah, overwhelming. Incredible support from all over the world, yeah, unbelievable.
And it's not just people from the driving community as well, it's people from Poland, from Britain, all over the world as well.
Yeah, well, I think that was the main thing, is the Polish community in the UK that started spreading it around the world to obviously all their families, Polish people around the world, and that's how it grew. Most of the money has come from Polish people, so that tells you everything, really.
And I know that the family of Łukasz Urban were really touched as well. His cousin Ariel Żurawski contacted you and invited you to Łukasz's funeral in Banie.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. We went over and met all the family, lovely people. So quiet, unassuming, gracious people. The hospitality is second to none, and can't thank them enough, and can't wait to go see them again soon, yeah.
OK, well, Dave, thank you very much. And today is about thanking Dave from the Polish Embassy in London.
Kasia, thank you. Dozens of people have died in parts of Central and Eastern Europe in the past few days because of bitterly cold weather. In Poland, where 10 people died, temperatures fell to minus 20 degrees yesterday, and heavy snow has fallen in southern Italy, parts of Turkey and even in the Greek islands. Let's speak to our correspondent in Budapest, Nick Thorpe. Nick.
Yes, well, it's pretty cold here, as you can see. I'm just standing across from the Hungarian Parliament here in Budapest, and the Danube, large ice floes floating down the Danube. It's relatively mild here in Budapest this morning, only about -8. Temperatures touching 28 degrees Celsius yesterday on the northern border. But in neighbouring Romania, in the eastern Carpathians, 67 degrees. A record -67 was recorded on one mountain peak yesterday, and obviously weather like this causing enormous disruption. Many schools in Romania and Bulgaria are closed, and the most vulnerable people, the homeless in the cities, and migrants, refugees still trying to limp up through the Balkan route from Turkey into Greece and so on. Very remarkable weather conditions. Then also on the Black Sea coast, the snow and ice along there. Very difficult conditions in large parts of Eastern Europe today.
Nick Thorpe in Budapest, thank you. We can get more on the weather now with Louise Lear. And some of that weather heading this way or not?
Cold, yes, but that weather from Europe is not coming towards the UK, but it is going to turn increasingly cold. Everything bar the kitchen sink probably thrown at us through the course of this week. We started off today, though, mild and wet. But if you're taking a walk out across Lancashire, as you can see by this Weather Watchers picture, a bit muddy underfoot, but it is brightening up as the rain really spills its way down into the southeast corner in the next few hours. Following on behind, a scattering of showers. It's windy with it. And those showers in the far north of Scotland turning increasingly wintry as they fall across higher ground. Gales are likely to pick up here. The rain clearing from the southeast, perhaps though through the middle of the afternoon. So brighter skies for some, a scattering of isolated showers, but an improving picture. Not so though across the London area and into East Anglia. We'll have to wait until the end of the afternoon before that rain clears through. So it's going to be a breezy afternoon with plenty of showers through Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. And you can see waiting out in the wings something a little more organised, and that's going to arrive after dark. So it's a pretty dismal end to the day in the far north. It's going to be windy with gales blowing that rain through at quite a pace, but it's going to be a wet old night here. Breezy with some showers on west-facing coast, sheltered eastern areas, touch on the chilly side, but too much of a breeze for frost to be an issue. 2 or 3 degrees perhaps to greet us in sheltered eastern parts. So we start off tomorrow, it's going to be a windy note. It's going to be a showery note, showers chiefly out to the west. But then as we go through the day, something a little more organised starts to drift in generally across the country. It's going to be a weak affair in terms of rain, a bit of a nuisance really, a lot of cloud around. Again, still quite mild on Tuesday, 7 to 11 degrees. The colder air starts to dig in as the winds swing round during Wednesday. Now for England and Wales, a good deal of dry weather in the story, but the showers turning increasingly perhaps wintry, even at lower levels. So it stays mild to the south with 7 to 9 degrees at around 4 or 5 further north. So if you saw from that report earlier in Europe, it's been a miserable start to the year, particularly across the bulk of Central and Eastern Europe. But westerly winds will start to drive back the real cold air out of Germany, Poland and the Czech Republic over the next few days. So a glimmer of slightly better news here. But for us, it's the wind direction swinging from a westerly to a northerly. Our cold air is coming from the Arctic, not from Europe, but it is going to turn bitterly, bitterly cold over the next few days towards the end of the week. And that means that any showers that we could see will turn increasingly wintry, even at lower levels. If you're out and about at the end of the week, more details on early weather warnings can be seen on our website. Sophie.
Louise, thank you. A reminder now of our main story this lunchtime. The Prime Minister has been outlining her plans to combat what she called the hidden injustice of mental illness. That's all from the BBC News at 1. So it's goodbye from me on BBC One. We now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.